Have you ever wondered what is the secret ingredient to love? How do we really find someone who loves us? How do we love other people? Is the secret ingredient being able to communicate about anything? Maybe honesty and trust? Maybe being able to see how alike we are, how we have the same values? Is that really love? What is love? It's challenging. It's a challenging definition because nowadays, what do we see love is? Love is how infatuated we are with other people. And that's in a relationship where there's a spouse relationship or a relationship of a marriage, relationship of someone who's trying to get married, trying to be serious with someone in a long term relationship. Um, then we have love between children and parents and with other people. Love with us and our older parents. So relationships of love really are all about one thing, and that is being able to sacrifice yourself. We live in a me generation. It's all about me, iPhone, iPad. It's all about benefiting me. And that's understandable because we live in this world where we came to this world being very selfish, only wanting, only wanting. And it's actually so interesting how a baby is born with its fists clenched and must learn how to unclench its fist in order to give. And a person dies with, hands open and is born with clenched fists. They need to learn how to give selflessly. And today we will learn why this is so important and how sacrificing yourself really builds love with anyone, with any type of relationship. We learn from Rabbi Zelik Pliskin in Parshat Hukat. When necessary to correct a fault, behave in the opposite manner. It's really beautiful how he touches upon this in Bamidbar, where it says, "This is the statute of the Torah which the Almighty commanded, saying." So, what is love? It's really important for us to understand this. We'll be able to understand this part of the Parsha and understand what love is. The purification of a person who came in contact with the red heifer, with the para aduma, is really very interesting. The Sforno explains that a person who became spiritually impure through contact with a corpse became pure through this process. So what does this mean? While in the process of the purified person who underwent this, it also caused people who were previously pure to become impure. In other words, a person is impure because they touched the red heifer and they become impure. Now they have to go to a person to help them purify themselves. That person touches the red heifer in order to purify the person who initially touched the red heifer, and in this way the person becomes pure and the other one as a result becomes impure. In other words, by the same process, one is purified and the other one is unpurified and becomes impure. Okay, so through this process, there are a few things that are used. The wood from a cedar tree is used, which actually represents strength and power. The hyssop is used, which means a humble leaf. And the scarlet is used. Scarlet is representing a bad midah, a bad trait. This is teaching us something so profound. When a person has a fault, a bad character trait, he needs to go to the opposite extreme in order to correct that fault. The proper way to behave in all character traits is really to finding the middle path in this trait. The bad trait is symbolized by the scarlet. When a person has a fault, he should behave in the extreme opposite manner. This extreme behavior is wrong for the average person, but correct for him. This is symbolized for the fact that the same thing that can cause impurity for one person can bring about purity for someone else. So I'm going to give you a quick example where a person is naturally very, very kind gives her time, her energy, financial means to other people whenever she's asked. Now, this is a good quality, seemingly. However, a person needs to learn how to make balance in life, set boundaries, set healthy boundaries, not only to preserve self-dignity, but to know that we're not supposed to be there for everyone whenever they call. Only Hashem can be there for everyone at any time, for anyone at any time, really. So a person who tries to do everything all the time is really not being honest with herself, and they are created with only so much energy and so much effort and ability. So trying to do everything for everyone is really counteracting your ability and also the belief in Hashem. Hashem can only do everything at any time and doesn't is not bound to a certain amount of energy. So we have to remember that going to the opposite extreme of a behavior is going to actually help. For example, this person who's extremely kind needs to stop doing things for the people, for others, even when they ask, for a good 30 days. When in this way this character trait is balanced. So after 30 or 40 days, now she'll be doing things sometimes and not always saying yes to everything. So it's really important for us to kind of balance this character trait. And it's a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing to do with all character traits. However, it is definitely something that our sages recommend. So as you can see, something that purified one person is really impurifying another, meaning we should go to the opposite end of the extreme of a character trait in order to find a balance, to be on the middle ground. It was an interesting story of Rabbi Simcha Sissel of Kelm. He noticed that one of his daughters was very into money, had a tendency to like money a lot, and in order to prevent this trait to sprout and to continue to overtake her and to become dominating, each day he would give her some money and he would take her over to a charity place where she would place the money she was given. In this way, he taught her how to be generous with what she has with money. So a practical tip is just be aware of what traits you need to correct. For a limited amount of time, act completely opposite to your usual way of behaving until you find yourself automatically behaving appropriately. So let's say you have a bad temper. Ignore anything that happens that irritates you for a month. And I know it's hard. However, keep at it, and your new habits are going to be actually your nature. Or, for example, not speaking Lashon Hara, even when you're permitted to, not speaking negatively about other people, not criticizing at all, even when you're entitled to, even when it's going to help someone. Just don't do it. Don't do it at all. And eventually, after 30 days or so, you'll be able to find the middle ground and really speak a lot less Lashon Hara. There really isn't no middle ground for Lashon Hara, but you'll see that you'll be able to speak positively much more often in this way. Okay, so back to how do we feel love towards other people. Love necessitates making sacrifices for another person. As it says, and the priest is impure until the evening. Rabbi Yitzchak of Worki said that the essence of the para aduma, purifying those who are spiritually impure, is the concept of love thy neighbor. And his grandson, Rabbi Mendel of Worki, explained that this is because the priest who was involved in the purification process became impure himself by the same process that purified the person who came into contact with him. When someone loses out himself in order to help someone else, that is the ultimate in love of one's fellow man. And we must remember that. The person who is not willing to make any sacrifices for other people will always find reasons why it was too difficult for him to do acts of kindness for others. To help other people takes time, it takes energy, and sometimes it takes money. But when someone truly loves another person, he feels pleasure in all the sacrifices that he makes for him, for other people. So some examples we can think of is, making your spouse's favorite dish, even though it's not something you're going to eat for dinner, it makes you so happy. It's something that you're sacrificing your time, your energy for someone else, right? Or your children's chores. One of the chores, maybe they didn't finish. You don't even mention it to them, or you could mention it to them and say, you know what, I'll just do this for you, sweetie. And it makes them feel so good that mom can be flexible, makes them feel so good that they're also understood, and it definitely enhances the love and respect between the child and their parents. So these are some practical tips you can try. Do something that is completely an act of a sacrifice, meaning only benefiting the other person and not you. And you'll see how, if you do this every day, let's say for about a week, you'll see how it actually enhances your relationships with other people, and you actually start forgiving yourself for a lot of your mistakes and forgiving other people. A person can't forgive other people if they cannot forgive themselves first. It's just that that's just how it works. We have to love ourselves and respect ourselves and forgive ourselves for our mistakes, and that's when we'll be able to have loving relationships with other people and forgive them much quicker. Okay, so in order for us to illustrate this beautiful concept of loving your neighbor as yourself and being able to love another person is really just to sacrifice yourself is is truly illustrated by the stories by Rabbi Tzvi Nakar in the book of 102 stories that changed people's lives, and it was told over by Rabbi Chaim Zaid. So Rabbi Chaim Zaid, he was a speaker and a rabbi, and he spent Shabbat uh, in a hotel in Israel. He was invited as a guest speaker for a Kiruv organization, an outreach organization in Israel. The Shabbat was beautiful. The guests were wonderful and welcoming, growth-oriented people, and the food was delicious. The atmosphere was positive and elevated. Since his wife wasn't feeling well, he decided to take his teenage daughter with him to this Shabbat, and in this way, his wife actually stayed with one of his married children. Around midnight, his teenage daughter approached him and said with a yawn, Abba, I'm really tired. The lectures are great, but I'm too exhausted to appreciate them. He was in the heat of a debate in his lecture, so he handed her the keys and wished her Shabbat Shalom and sweet dreams. He sat with the guests for another hour and a half, answering questions, sharing inspirational anecdotes, and resolving misconceptions until everyone agreed it was time to call it a night. He was so incredibly fatigued and tired after hours of lecturing, talking, debating, and clarifying. He set off to his cabin, looking forward for a good night's sleep. He knocked out he knocked on his daughter's door, but it didn't open. He kept knocking. She must have been in a deep sleep, he thought. He was a veteran father of teenage girls, and he knew that she wouldn't wake up unless he made a lot of noise. He was reluctant to make a lot of noise, knowing that it was so late at night, as he knew it would wake up other people in the surrounding cabins. He decided to go to the reception area and ask for a key, laughing at himself that who was actually going to be up at this time at Shabbat. There's no reason anybody should call. Um, as soon as he entered the reception desk, that's what he realized. The lights were dimmed, and he realized, of course, that nobody was on duty on Shabbat. His shoulders sagged. He went outside and noticed that the garden furniture was out. The weather was so beautiful and pleasant, and he grudgingly sat down in a comfortable armchair, and tried to fall asleep. A few minutes later, he spotted an older rabbi, Rav Meir, who was also a lecturer for the Shabbat, and his wife was taking a stroll on the hotel grounds. Shabbat Shalom, Rav Zaid. Rav Zaid explained his story now and how he was locked out of his cabin. Rav Meir laughed and turned to him, saying, all the same, you can't stay here all night. Let's try to wake her up. So the three of them tried to knock on his daughter's cabin, to no avail. She wasn't waking up. The other surrounding cabins, started getting upset at the fact that it was too noisy, so they stopped knocking and went back to the lobby. Rav Meir offered to stay up with him, saying, "It's such a lovely weather, I really don't mind sitting outside here and talking some more. I've got such great stories. My wife has even more, and I'm sure you have your share. We'll have a good time together." Rav Zaid was reluctant, but Rav Meir was very persistently persuasive. Rav Meir pressed, "Rav Chaim, we're in this together." So Rav Zaid could tell that he meant it, what he was saying, and he was amazed at just how he meant every word, and he seemed to live and breathe the mitzvot of bein adam lechavero, loving people, just loving people and helping them, right? Rav Zaid told him that very few people would insist on such a selfless deed, and Rav Meir chuckled to himself and he said, "The truth is, Rav Chaim, is not really selfless at all. It's quite selfish. You see, if I headed off to bed knowing that I left you out here, I promise you I won't even sleep a wink. So what's the difference if I'm awake in my hotel room or awake chatting with you on the grass?" And the second option is definitely much more appealing. Rav Zaid gave up and thanked Rav Meir and his wife sincerely. They chatted a while, and then Rav Meir and his wife fell asleep. And soon after, Rav Zaid also tried to fall asleep. Around 4 a.m., Rav Zaid saw someone pass him on a scooter. It was an Arab maintenance man, and he asked him to please open his cabin door, which he did, and he bade Rav Meir goodbye, and he thanked him profusely, and he quickly went to see if his daughter was okay. She was sleeping soundly, and everything was fine. Then that night there's a Milava Malka. There's a there's a banquet, and that's when they eat. And there's a Chinese auction, and it was really really beautiful. 30 minutes into the event, Rav Chaim calls Rav Zaid, and he exclaimed enthusiastically. He says, Rav Meir called Rav Zaid, who was actually Rav Chaim. "You have to hear the story. I just got a call from my son-in-law last night at 1:30. My daughter went into labor 6 weeks early, and they took an ambulance. After a quick examination, the doctor took my son-in-law aside and said that things did not look good. The doctors told him, 'The baby's in distress, and your wife is in danger too. There are two options. Either wait for the birth to proceed according to his old schedule, with the baby being born brain damaged, or even worse, or we operate.' My son-in-law said, 'So operate.' He goes, 'Well, it's not so simple.' The doctor said, 'If we do the surgery, there's a chance your wife will suffer permanent damage.' As you can imagine, the son-in-law was beside himself. He had to make a decision on his own. There was nobody to consult. It was Shabbat. He had to come in to bring his wife to the hospital, and he was distraught. He was so upset. He felt so alone. He didn't know what to do. There's a Jewish man passed by, and he decided to tell him his whole story, and he was crying. He's like, "I don't know what to do." He goes, "Don't worry, you don't have to do it alone. Upstairs, there's a Torah scholar. Go to him, ask him for advice, and he'll give you a blessing." And before he went up, he read Tehillim, and he prayed to Hashem, and he went upstairs, and he saw this man. He saw this man sitting there reading a sefer, and he said to him, and his name was Rav Yaakov Edelstein. As soon as he saw him, he looked up with kind and gentle eyes, and his son-in-law exclaimed, "Rabbi, we need a Yeshua," which means a salvation. "My wife, she went into early labor, and the doctors say that operating would be better. But there is a serious chance that she'll suffer physical damage. If we don't operate, the baby will be born brain damaged at best. I have to decide as soon as possible. What should I do?" Rav Yaakov asked the name of his wife and added very intensely, "She should have an easy birth, and the baby should be born healthy and intact, with strength to serve Hashem Yitbarach." The son-in-law ran downstairs to find the doctor. He was so relieved. Full of confidence, he told the doctors he decided to let things proceed naturally. Just an hour later, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy, after a very easy birth. After the birth, the doctor was so overwhelmed that he went upstairs to Rav Yaakov's room and kissed his hand. At the same time as this was happening, Rav Meir and his wife were just a few dozen miles away in the hotel from the hospital, totally unaware that their daughters and grandson's lives were in danger. Instead, they were losing sleep over a Jew who had been locked out of his hotel room and doing their utmost so that he wouldn't feel alone. When their daughter's health was in danger, they were honoring the mitzvah of loving thy neighbor as yourself. They didn't let Rav Chaim Zaid sleep, meaning sleep on the armchair by himself. They wanted to join him. They didn't want to leave him alone. And at the same time, Hashem repaid them by saving their daughter's life and their grandson's life. Hashem sent a miracle that not only saved their daughter's life and their grandson's life, but also gave them much more blessing in their lives. And this is a lesson we must all learn. A Jew is measured by his deeds. Rav Meir and his wife were not young, and it was a big sacrifice on their part, and Hashem repaid them from afar. They made a big sacrifice towards someone they don't really even know. So you can imagine how when you show love towards your fellow man, Hashem outpours his love for you. The way we behave towards the people in our lives is exactly the way Hashem behaves towards us. So if you want blessing in your life, bless other people, be a blessing to others, and that will enhance our love and unity in the world. Appreciating the insights of Rabbi Zelik Pliskin in Growth Through Torah, Leah Abramov, Being and Becoming, awakening awareness of your greatness and potential.